For more than 20 years, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia have been members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Since joining, it's been a firm belief that their membership in this military alliance has been key to guaranteeing their independence and deterring Russia from aggressive action. This is due to the principle of collective defense, which is enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Collective defense means that an attack against one ally is considered as an attack against all allies. But we live in interesting times, and the solidarity of the alliance is seemingly tested year after year, and recent remarks from the new U.S. Defense Secretary under the Trump administration have only cast further doubt on the effectiveness of the alliance if Article 5 were to be invoked due to Russian aggression. And so today we ask the question, can the Baltics still rely on NATO for their national security? For the first and only time in its history, NATO invoked Article 5 following the New York City attacks in September 2001. A NATO mission was launched in Afghanistan and, along with many other countries, the Baltics sent forces to the Middle East. While that was the only time that Article 5 has been invoked thus far, NATO has taken collective defense measures on several occasions elsewhere. This includes responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine through the provision of military equipment and training for Ukraine by allies and partners. But when it comes to confronting the Russian aggression of the past 3+ years, NATO has had its fair share of hurdles. Based on the positions of their leaders, Hungary and Slovakia have presented challenges in providing assistance to Ukraine. In 2024, Hungary said it would not be part of a NATO plan to take over from the US in coordinating security assistance in Ukraine. Its leader, Viktor Orbán, had threatened to block efforts to support Kyiv up to that point. Hungary had also delayed Sweden's accession to NATO due to Swedish criticism of Hungarian democracy. Since returning to power in 2023, Slovakia's Prime Minister has ended his country's military aid to Ukraine and pledged to join Hungary in blocking Ukraine from joining NATO. He has also been critical of EU sanctions on Russia. And while Turkey has shown support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, it was also a temporary barrier to Finland and Sweden joining the alliance for various political reasons. The country continues to walk the fine line in doing business and continuing relations with Russia, while also being a NATO member. But the recent news coming from a NATO meeting in Brussels has been perhaps the most shocking for members of the alliance. It was on Wednesday, February 12th, that US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called Ukraine's desire to recover all of the territory lost to Russia since 2014 a quote-unquote unrealistic objective. Hegseth said that the US must focus first on securing its own borders and its rising competition with China, stating,
"As the United States prioritizes its attention to these threats, European allies must lead from the front. Together, we can establish a division of labor that maximizes our comparative advantages in Europe and Pacific, respectively."
He also said that the US was opposed to Ukrainian membership in the NATO alliance. This was somewhat withdrawn the next day, with Hegseth clarifying that negotiations are led by President Trump and that everything is on the table. In the past, Trump has gone so far as to threaten to pull the United States out of NATO unless allies boost military spending. While it seems fair that NATO members live up to their commitments to spend at least 2% of GDP, the threat of NATO's most powerful member withdrawing could be considered extreme and unreasonable. The increasingly inward focus by Donald Trump and the possibility that the United States will not support European allies prompts us to examine two weaknesses of how the NATO alliance works. The first is that Article 5 sounds good in principle. An attack on one is an attack on all, and most would imagine this to mean an obligation to deploy troops to whichever NATO member is under attack. However, the detailed text would say otherwise. On its website, NATO states that, with the invocation of Article 5, allies can provide any form of assistance they deem necessary to respond to a situation. It adds that, this is an individual obligation on each ally, and each ally is responsible for determining what it deems necessary in the particular circumstances. It's therefore left to the judgment of each individual member country to determine how it'll contribute. And so this clearly leaves a lot of room for countries to do the bare minimum, whether it be political or economic sanctions, the contribution of non-lethal aid, etc. The second issue is NATO's principle of consensus, where all members must be in agreement. Consensus decision-making is a fundamental principle. It has been accepted as the sole basis for decision-making in NATO since the creation of the alliance in 1949, the organization's website states. This means that every member, big or small, has a veto when it comes to NATO action. This is what allowed Hungarian and Turkish leaders to block and delay Sweden and Finland from joining NATO. Consensus decision-making may have been fine decades ago, when all members shared a similar mindset and were more unified, but political turnover, if not turmoil, has led to increased disagreement among member nations. And so, to circle back to the main question of this video, can the Baltics still rely on NATO? Well, while the alliance is still intact, it's unclear how NATO would collectively respond if an invasion of the Baltics occurred. Support from all NATO members seems more and more in doubt these days, with some countries being sympathetic to Russia and others becoming more focused on domestic issues. However, to counter this uncertainty, we can at least say that the overwhelming majority of alliance members are committed to protecting NATO's eastern flank. And while they aren't technically part of NATO multinational units deployed to the Baltics, multiple American combat units are stationed in the region, while the United States leads the NATO multinational battle group in Poland. All three Baltic nations are also members of the Joint Expeditionary Force, or JEF, a UK-led coalition of like-minded nations comprising high-readiness forces configured to respond rapidly to crises in the High North and Northern Europe. As a UK government website states, JEF has an opt-in approach, which means that as long as 2 or more JEF members agree to work together, then a plan can go ahead, with subsequent agreement of the practicalities. We'll be sure to have a separate video on the JEF coalition in the future, so be sure to subscribe. But what are your thoughts on the current state of military alliances and collective defense as it concerns the Baltic nations? Let us know by leaving a comment.